Hello everyone. So, I have to say this video kind of surprised me. It really did. Okay? I picked a Royal Navy destroyer, and I'm going to pick a few other Navy's destroyers over the years, similar reasons. Literally because I was looking for a vessel which had a connection with the date of the day. The idea was to give you a typical Royal Navy destroyer. A typical vessel in the Royal Navy. Unfortunately, the vessel I picked, which I will explain the date connection to this, was actually also involved in the hunting down and sinking, and was very actively involved, of killing two of the Kriegsmarines U-boat princes. And that's just the beginning of its claims to fame. So, I picked this as an example of a typical Royal Navy destroyer to give you an average, life experience of an interwar, World War I, World War II Royal Navy destroyer. And it is typical. But it's also very not typical at the same time. It's got a very typical career, but it's got very untypical highlights. And so, yeah. This is HMS Walker we're talking about. Hello, Raleigh. Hello. You are gorgeous. Yes, I know you want to say hello to everyone. I know you do. I know you want to say hello to everyone. But yes. Night. In the nicest way. Walker's special. But I know. Lots of people look for very, very specialist boats. They look for all sorts of famous names, but sometimes the ships which deserve the fame don't get it. I'm also going to introduce you to a whole slew of officers tonight, which you've probably never heard of before, but who probably do deserve to be famous. So, it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. And it's going to be something new, hopefully. So let's start off with the V&W destroyers, because these are what the Royal Navy are producing at the end of World War I. They are the Royal Navy's equivalent to the four stackers. And they are a good, solid design. They really are a good, solid design. For the Royal Navy, these ships are a balance of all the lessons they've learned in 1914, 1915, and 1916. They are built technically from 1916 onwards, but a lot of them are laid down actually 1917. And a lot of them come into existence. To provide the Royal Navy with the mass at the end of the war, but also for the Royal Navy, they're kind of building them the idea that they're going to probably have to deal with a pause in construction in the 20s. You have to remember, the only major navy which has, within its institutional memory range, because it has survived that long, which has gone from a major international war down to peacetime afterwards, is the Royal Navy. That's the only major one which has survived that long. The US have claimed that fame because of the Civil War, but they never really got the full range of construction that you get in an international war versus a Civil War scenario. They basically got a littoral fleet rather than a literal fleet. And so the Royal Navy knows what's coming. The Royal Navy knows what happened at the end of the Napoleonic Wars. They know what happened at every major war they've ever fought in. Politicians declare, "You've got enough ships now! Peace is forevermore! We're not paying for anything." Honestly, if the Royal Navy remember that at the end of the Cold War, towards the end of the Cold War, and hadn't been caught so wrong-shooted by the Cold War, they might have built a whole load of ships. I can just imagine. If you told the Royal Navy, oh, by the way, the Cold War's going to end in 1990, 1992-ish, in 1983, if you told them that, they'd have that warning. Just imagine the fleet the Royal Navy would have churned out on the back of the Falklands War. Every 5 seconds would have been, because of the Falklands War, we need another aircraft carrier. Because of the Falklands War, we need another dozen nuclear submarines. Because of the Falklands War, we need another 24 destroyers. It would have been absolutely manic. But they thought they had time. They thought they had time. And the V&Ws are perfectly good destroyers. They're usually around about 1,100 tons. They are armed with 4 to 6, sometimes slightly more, 21-inch torpedoes. They have a range of 4-inch guns, some 3-inch guns. Usually they have about 4 4-inch guns and a 3-inch gun on them. They usually have some pom-poms on them. They are very capable destroyers for their time. There is literally nothing really wrong with them. And they are very capable fleet boats as they are independent operational vessels. And Walker, well, Walker herself, she's one of the 21 Admiralty W class. As part of the V&W classes of destroyers, because first thing you realise of the V&Ws is there's the V-class leaders, the V-class ships, the W-class ships, the Thornycroft V&W class ships, the Thornycroft modified W-class ships, the Admiralty modified W-class ships, and the Australian ships. And that's before we get into the conversions done in World War II. Isn't that right? That's before we get into the conversions. So there is a lot of ships. And the planned number had been 107, but in the Royal Navy probably knew they weren't going to get all those. But interesting enough, they do get 67. They do get quite a large number of them. So they do pretty darn well. They do pretty well, don't they? So that being said, useful ships. And for the RN, I would say there is an advantage to only getting 67, not 107. So one of the reasons they use for justifying the construction of new destroyers when they do in the late 1920s is because they didn't get enough destroyers to tide them over into the 1930s, you know. It's terrible, they didn't. So they needed to start building flotillas in the late 1920s. It's just... It's so predictable, it's sickly. But that being said, let's consider Walker herself. She was laid down on the 26th of March, 1917, which is 109 years today. 109 years ago today, she was laid down. She was launched 29th of November, 1917. She's completed the 12th of February, 1918. And she's commissioned on the same day she's completed. There you go. That's her connection. That's why I picked her. I literally picked this ship because she's laid down today. I was trying to figure out, should I draw a name from a hat? What should I do? How should I do this? I went, no, literally. I know it's going to go live on that date, so I will literally just search the database for that date of Royal Navy destroyers. Yes, I do have an Excel spreadsheet with every Royal Navy destroyer. Yes, I do realise... The fact that I've been tested and found not to have autism, just it's the function of my short-term memory, means I am... It is fun sometimes. So many of the autistic tendencies are actually coping strategies for not having a functioning short-term memory. It's quite disturbing. The two do run along together. You do sometimes wonder if some people, because short-term memory dyslexia is quite so rare, you do sometimes wonder if some autistics are actually people like me with just the very rare form of dyslexia. Or whether some people who are diagnosed with a very rare form of dyslexia are actually autistic. But I was tested. I'm the rare form of dyslexia. And there you go. HMS Walker. She doesn't look like anything special, does she? She's just a simple destroyer. 1,100 tons of capability. There aren't that many pictures of her surviving. There are a few. I used both of them I could find that are in decent condition in this video. But she is a vessel which serves the Royal Navy from her commissioning in February 1918 till when she is decommissioned in 1945. Her motto is ready and faithful. Ready and faithful. And that sums her up. That sums her up completely. So, with that all being said, who was she built by? She's built by William Denny and Brothers Limited. Now, William Denny and Brothers Limited is one of those interesting organisations where it's kind of difficult to trace their beginnings, but we can work out their end is 1963. Their beginnings are actually probably a lot earlier than 1840. Because there was William Denny and Sons, William Denny and Brothers, and there's various other versions of that as well. So, in the form of William Denny and Brothers Limited, they were around for roughly 123 years. And, by the way, if you go to their site now in Dumbarton, you will find the Scottish Maritime Museum, and it's one of the places which I really, really love to go. I highly recommend it. It's a really cool museum to go to. The fact that it so rarely seems to be visited by people from the UK disturbs me, and the wider UK. It seems to be one of the ones which gets ignored, and it shouldn't be. It's got some really cool stuff in that, and I love them. I haven't been for a long time, but when I have, every time I have been absolutely blown away by how cool it is. So, why am I bringing up this? Well, this is one of many, many yards. Many yards Britain had that could build destroyers. So she's not built by one of the specialist yards. She's not a Thornycroft ship. She's not, built by the speed demons of the J.S. White Company. She is built by William Denny and Brothers, who build solid ships. That's what they're known for. They will build a solid ship. It might not be the fastest, it might not be the prettiest, it might not be the, cheapest or the most agile, but what it will be is a solid. It will be a solid 90% on every single criteria. It will be a solid ship you can use. And that's what she is. She's a very solid ship that you can use. I'm moving this from above my head down to here. That should hopefully not block if he pops up. And so, there you go. Now, her World War I service. Well, it was actually quite active. World War I might not last for a long time with her. She might only be in it for roughly 9 months. But she goes from the Grand Fleet to the Harwich Force and back again. She's used for both forces. She's a solid ship. She's going backwards and forwards. She's where she's needed. If they need extra ships to surge out the Grand Fleet, she's there. If they need destroyers to firm up the Harwich Force to go and do inshore work, she's there. She's exactly where she needs to be. She's got enough firepower, she's got enough speed, she's got enough capability. She is there. And that's her value. Yes, that's what all her sisters are doing, but that is their value. Their value is, these are warships. And they're escorting the fleet. They're freeing up other destroyers to escort convoys and do anti-submarine warfare on a wider mercantile economic warfare scale. But they are making sure there is a Harwich Force. They are making sure there is a Grand Fleet. And if the Grand Fleet had got into a battle, if there had been a last hurrah of the Kaisermarine, where they had charged out to die heroically under the guns of the Grand Fleet, the torpedoes that had been slamming into them would have come from V&W class destroyers. A lot of them. That was what they were doing. That's what Walker was doing. When you look up the actual details, you find that the flotilla she's part of, you can't really define exactly where it is when it is. I went through all the various sort of systems and databases I have access to, and I was going, oh, well, they have some of their ships already off there, and then they swap over some of the ships down there, and they're moving them about. Why? Because that keeps them entertained. It keeps their teeth sharp. You see, operating with the fleet is good. Operating the fleet is necessary because they're going to be supporting them. But in a battle, if they are unleashed, they're going to be acting like the Harwich Force. Wolverines in destroyer form. absolutely insane. Tasmanian Devil, Whirling Dervish, whatever you want to think about, that's what destroyers are supposed to act like in battle as far as the British are concerned by this point in World War One. And so you can't give a ship better training to go and hang out with the Harwich Force, where they literally build that into their force structure. So by alternating the ships between the Grand Fleet and the Harwich Force, they're getting the best of both worlds. They are starting to build that force, that elite within elite, the destroyer elite, sense of, superior, of eliteness, of being an elite corps, cadre in the Royal Navy, at this very point. They're doing it in 1917, they're doing it in 1916, 17 onwards, to they're building this cadre, this esprit de corps. Because they have to. Because that's what they need these forces to do. They need these forces to be capable, they need these forces to be viable, they need these forces to be able to do this stuff. Answer the quick question in the chat. The reason why ships tend to ignore the date they're laid down versus in favour of their launch date, because it's from the date they're launched we age them, because that's from the date they first meet salt water. Basically, when they're laid down, until they're launched, we're sort of considering them, for want of a better description, in the womb. They are protected from the world. When they are launched, then they have to face the evil of the world that is salt water that will destroy them. So that's why we age them. Even if vessels launch into fresh water, we start aging from that point, because even fresh water can be nasty. And also because, let's be honest, most ships, it's not long till they find salt water a moment after they've been launched. So, Walker, well, she goes off to the Baltic campaign. And here's a bit of fun for you all. This destroyer, this little V&W destroyer, gets hit twice from the battleship Petroplusk, a Gangot class, while she's the part of the British campaign in the Baltic. Well, love it, she's doing that. And by the way, go and look up Walker's battle honours, and you know she hasn't got to the Baltic campaign. She gets hit twice by a Russian battleship. And when I say hit by her, not her 4.7-inch shells. She survives. Both hits seem to be through and throughs. But she doesn't get a battle honour for it. I'd like us all to consider that. A destroyer is actively patrolling, protecting against a breakout by the Bolshevik fleet from Kronstadt. She's part of the blockading force. She gets hit by shells from a battleship, and she still doesn't get a battle honour. Let's think about that. She gets hit by a battleship. She still doesn't get a battle honour. You know, it's expected. You got hit twice, you survived, good. Roll it off, get back into action. I think she did take it personally, but we'll leave that to one side. She had a grand old time in the Baltic campaign. She really did. She, took part in quite a lot of blockades. She was out there from May 1919 right to the end. She actually popped out in 1918, came back, popped out again, I think. From what I read on the transcripts, that seems to be what happened with her. And she visited Helsinki and, to go say hi to Finland and tell them we would support them. And, she was actually a constant visitor in that scenario. She went back to Finland in 1926 as part of the Atlantic Fleet's visit And that's her next assignment. She joins the 1st Destroyer Flotilla in the Atlantic Fleet, under the command of a little-known officer called Captain Andrew Cunningham. Just a minor officer in the Royal Navy's history. He was the captain of 1st Flotilla in the Atlantic Fleet of destroyers, and at certain points he actually used her. So yes, HMS Walker, which I picked at random. I'd argue she already has 2 claims to fame. She's been fired at by a Russian battleship and survived after being hit, and she's been part of a force that actually been directly commanded at certain points by Andrew Cunningham. Knight, have I already piqued your interest? How about everyone else? Have I piqued your interest in this ship? Because, trust me, we haven't got anywhere near the really cool stuff this ship does. Okay? This ship does some absolutely bajinkas stuff in World War II. And I literally picked this ship just because today was the day she was laid down. I did not lower my bases. Now, as part of the Atlantic Fleet, part of operations, she took part in a lot of exercises in terms of developing and codifying Royal Navy destroyer doctrine. And one of the things she does is she spends a lot of time in the 1st Flotilla taking over the A to K line role, the scout destroyer role, and finding out what are needed for that role. By the way, later on, of course, the Tribal class destroyers are built with the requirement of being able to fill the A to K role. And the reason the differences are made in those ships and the way they're formed, part of that comes down to the experience gained by 1st Destroyer Flotilla, by vessels like HMS Walker, and how they handled in the weather, how they were sorted in the weather, how they basically survived those operations. So this is what she's up to. This is her 1920s. Her World War I was the Germans didn't come out to fight, but don't worry, she got some action in the Baltic campaign, which we don't technically count, and she doesn't get a battle honour for, despite getting hit by a battleship twice. Oh. And then, well, in 1920s, she is escorting the Atlantic Fleet around. She's part of that force. She's under Andrew Cunningham. She's part of the development of British doctrine in terms of destroyer doctrine. She's part of Cunningham making his name as a theorist. He's made his name as a commander. Yes, he's made his name as a brave naval officer. But using this flotilla is part of him making his name as a theorist. She is a good and useful ship. With that being said, we're at the Shameless Book Plug, and now I'm going to answer some questions before we get into the rest of what happens, because I did kind of think it was going to take me roughly 25 minutes, half an hour to get through the first part of it, because there isn't really much information written about. The breakout attempt, there isn't much information about. There isn't much discussion. It's literally, they attempted breakout, they fired a load of shells, they saw we weren't backing down and we were actually acting very aggressively, and the destroyers were basically going, "Yay, red meat!" as destroyer crews want to do, and the Russians decided that they had better things to do with their day than try and break through them. So yes, HMS Walker. Let's do the questions. Let's open up Discord and do the questions quickly. This will be fun. There we go. Right now, questions are open. Let's do queue release and see what questions we've got. Wayne's World Science Tech. Are any Royal Navy destroyers typical? Theoretically. It's typical for the Royal Navy. There's typical others. Clarke, so war emergency destroyers. Like VW, what lessons were learned for World War II and what lessons were still valid today? For the VNWs, honestly, they're not really war emergency destroyers. I hate to say this, but there are destroyer types in World War I which are war emergency. I would say argue the S's are certainly war emergency. But I'd say the VW class are as much about building for the post-war scenario as they are about the wartime scenario. And that is something also I talk about in another video coming up about Royal Navy destroyers, about the Dutch Navy actually. Some ships are war emergency ships. They're true war emergency ships. They are built to, we're going to build these as quickly as possible. And some of them are, well, we're building them in wartime. We're technically building them on an emergency program, but we're building them to full naval standards, as if it's peacetime. So yeah, but the lessons pretty much learnt was don't skip on the weapon systems. Don't skip on weapons or engines. And that's not a bad idea. Never skimping on those things. Aidan, what is the best post-World War II 1950s destroyer design? My favourite's the Daring class. I've written a book about them. There. So that I'm kind of biased. I would say the Darings are pretty darn good, but I would say there are also quite a few good ones from the Americans. In the video I did cover the other day, they did quite a good few ones. And I'd say the late 50s to Charles F. Adams are pretty darn good. But again, they're going to be talked about more in terms of Arleigh Burke and what he was up to. Because Admiral Arleigh Burke had a lot of interesting ideas. And let's go for one. With the VW and V-class destroyers, what made them easier to convert than the World War I R&S class destroyers that came before them? Literally because they were built to full naval standards, they actually had the full plates and capabilities to be able to convert it. They were built to full naval standards, so they had the space, they had the design, they had the subdivision already, so you could do the conversions. And most of the conversions were literally lose a boiler room and gain a load of accommodation or fuel. Going on, in the reference to A to K duties being the sailing force, what do the A to K refer to in doctrine force structure? Imagine that you've got a line basically around your ship of A to K, and you've basically points on the compass forward of your fleet, and you take out from those positions and go extrapolate out to a straight line. So you go here, I will need on this bearing, this bearing, this bearing, and it's A to K because it goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. So you've got 11 positions, 5 out either side of the fleet, and 1 in the centre line. And so that's the A to K line you would be along. That's the scouting force at the front of the formation. And the idea was you would have ships along that line. So you'd have 11 positions, and you might not have them on every position. So you might only have 6 of them filled, or you might have 5 of them filled. But you would have enough of them filled you could cover out. You would always have A and K filled, but the ones in between might depend on the scenario, how you're filling, how you're working it out. You could theoretically have just the A, F and K ones. For some reason I was going, is it F or G, which is the middle one? Oh, good lord. That's the joy of short-term memory dyslexia. That's sometimes what you forget. You guys are going, is it F or G? I'm sure it's F, but I'm going to check. I'm going to actually count on my fingers and check, just to be sure. Sometimes you literally just fill 3 of them. Sometimes you'd fill more than that. Sometimes you might want to have, rather than F, you might want to have E and G filled, because you're worried about something coming from the centre and you want to have the mutual support. So, again, that's how you fill it out, and that's how you sort of worked out. So it's called the A to K line because of that. Nice everyone. As the V&W class of the same rationale like the Hulkins and the Admirals designed with post-war in mind, did the RN expect the World War I MRS class were not long for the post-World War I? No, they expected to have them for a while, but they didn't expect them to last further than the 1920s. They expected to be replacing them fairly shortly. Basically, they thought that in the 1920s they'd be getting rid of all those and replacing them all. And as we go through the questions, thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, supporting the channel, everything helping it grow. Let's smooth that now, and let's carry on. So, she spent 1932 to August 1939 in the reserve fleet. That's what the Royal Navy does with a lot of its ships. It sticks them in the reserve fleet. It's used her for, well, used and abused her, you could say, argue, for about 14 years. You expect roughly 24 years of service life. 20 to 24 years of service life from a ship. So, they'd used her for 14 years. If you keep her nice and protected and in a place where she's not going to get hit by big waves, she's not going to face all those problems, and you can maintain her and you can keep her nicely cleaned and take her into dry dock occasionally to paint her hull and check she's not springing a leak and turn over engines and grease the machines occasionally, and just a small number of personnel to wander around and keep all the ships looking good. You have giving the ship extra life, because if you think about it, if she really was limited to 20 years service, then the Royal Navy would have had to get rid of her in 1938 and replace her. They'd have been having to do a massive replacement of the destroyer force in 1938. Probably from they'd have had to order them in 1936, and they would have been ordering hundreds of ships. And that would have taken up quite a large chunk of British infrastructure industry, not just in Britain, but probably in the wider world as well, because of the various things that happened around the empire. So, you need to do something with her. See, by that time, by putting in a reserve. Again, it's something which is forgotten today. It is something which is sadly forgotten today, because she would be very, very useful if we had such a reserve force. In this time, though, they had the reservists, they had the personnel to crew it, they had everything set up to work it out. Now, one of the things I'm told is that you can't do it today. Ships are too complicated, they're too advanced. Now, they worked it out in this period by using people who had similar skills in their civilian life, who were interested in the sea, or who maybe were in the sea, they're merchant sailors. That seems to work as a good policy, but also they gave them training, they gave them time, and they had a ship to rally around. It was useful. Now, as Knights pointed out, they were actually replacing some of the obsolete destroyers in the 1930s, they were. But doing a whole replacement of the entire destroyer fleet, the Royal Navy had a couple of hundred destroyers. Replacing them all would have meant they couldn't have also been working on the cruisers and the capital ships and the carriers at the same time. And that would have meant they would have had to pause those efforts. Because what you want to do is have a balanced force. So you want to extend your force's life so they can do it. And one of the reasons they've been able to put these in reserves is they'd actually run down the R's and the S's and the other destroyers, which, frankly, they felt weren't going to be around for as long. Also, it's worthwhile noting, before the questions of discussion of manpower crew pool come up, the crew pool for the Royal Navy, when we're talking about these ships and reserve ships, was entirely from Britain. They were not expecting these to go to Dominions or Commonwealth. Not at this point. That comes up during World War II. It really does. They're expanding the fleet and really expanding the maximum. But at this point, the Royal Navy is dealing enough with the governments that the only government, Dominion government they have any faith in is the Australian one. And so the Royal Navy isn't expecting, and they're not expecting to get many ships crewed by India, because the government of India is firmly behind the army, the British Indian Army, and so they don't expect any support from them. Canada, they can't even get them to fund the Royal Canadian Navy properly, let alone fund let alone provide crews or crewing for British ships. So, no. This was entirely a British effort. For good or for ill, it was. Now, in August 1939, the British government go, it looks like there could be a threat on the horizon, but we don't want to look like we're reactivating the whole fleet for reasons of threat. Okay, what do we do? Let's have a royal review! Let's have a royal review. And we'll activate a whole load of reserve ships for the royal review, so it all look nice. We'll activate them. And we'll say we're doing it for the royal review. We're doing it for the new king. Because, again, we'd had an abdication. Just in 1936. And the previous review had been 1935. And so you needed to have, and that's all the pictures actually from, is from the previous review, you needed to have a new review. You needed to have something for the new king. You needed to have something to show the world that Britain was powerful. It was about diplomacy, it was about presence, it was about status. But most of all, it was about activating ships without looking like you're activating ships. And George VI went along with it and went, that sounds quite cool actually, I quite like ships. I was a Navy man, don't you know? And everyone's going, yes sir, we do know you're a Navy man. Unfortunately, he was not happy with one thing. There is quite a substantial rumour that George VI tried to get to command a ship for the day. Or rather, tried to get to do one of the reactivations, and was going, well, you know, I was an officer in the Royal Navy, I know what I'm doing, I could be in charge of a ship for its reactivation. And whilst he probably could have done a very good job, and he probably would have preferred being in charge of a ship to becoming king, it was fine. He didn't get it. And he survived. I'd also point out that there's quite a lot of fun around George VI. There is a lot of discussion around him and about people having ideas about whether or not he would succeed the throne. The realistic point is that at no point was anyone serious. No point did anyone serious suggest it would be anyone else, as much as he didn't want the job. You had to have something for the new king and anyone to suggest new clothes. The only one who could get away with suggesting new clothes was his wife, and no one wanted to try and suggest that against her. So yeah, it was a sensible thing to do. But again, this meant that the Royal Navy was able to reactivate a whole slew of reservist ships. They really did. And the amount of them which didn't get deactivated. Again, this is one of the things people often forget. At the beginning of World War II, the Royal Navy has a huge number of destroyers available to go. And the reason they have these destroyers available to go, they have all these ships available to go, is because they've already activated them. This is, again, one of the fun things which happens when Winston Churchill gets appointed as First Lord of the Admiralty. He goes, oh, have we activated the reserve ships? You know, we must activate the reserves. And the Admiralty are sitting looking and going, we've already done that, sir. What do you mean you've already done that? We did that back in August. Have they been through properly activated? Have they been put through dry dock and everything? Yes, yes. With knowledge that the Royal Review was coming up, and with that as our reason, they were all activated in time properly for August. I mean, we put them through all the proper working up. They just didn't deactivate them afterwards. You have a whole load of lovely extra destroyer flotillas swarming around. You have a whole load of cruisers and other ships brought out of reserve status. And frankly, it did make a king very happy. It did make George VI very, very happy to see the review. So it was a double win. But where does she get posted to? She gets posted to what's sometimes called the Celtic Sea or the Southwest Approaches. Now, in this period, she has a bit of fun. Walker has fun. What do I mean she has fun? Well, she's escorting convoys. That's pretty much what she's going to spend a lot of the war doing. She's going to be escorting convoys. And whilst returning from Plymouth, well, returning to Plymouth, from escorting convoy OB2, which at that point, OB2, if I'm not mistaken, and I am checking actually, because it was the Atlantic Ocean direction convoys going out to the Atlantic Ocean, usually from Liverpool, but sometimes they were gathered from other areas. Sometimes you'd have something, let's say, start off in Plymouth, gather ships up in through the Irish Sea, and then go out from Liverpool. And so I think they've been part of more sort of the gathering route and the escorting of getting the convoy out past the danger zone. She collided with HMS Vanquisher. This ship. It was not a good time. 14 men died. They were about 200 nautical miles southwest of the Cape Clear of Ireland, and it's some point in terms of the 10th or 11th September 1939. It's literally, war has just begun. The worst part of this all, and I'm going to not go into the graphic detail. There are reports. If you want to go and look them up, you can find them. You can find interesting discussions on things in certain books about it. And you can also go to things like U-Boat Net, etc., and you will find more descriptions of it. You also, if you look up... whose book is it? The Battle of the Atlantic by Andrew Williams. That goes into what I would feel almost an unnecessary detail, but, you know, it does. Some of the crew get caught in the wreckage between the two vessels, and they've suffered serious wounds, and they are trapped and unable to be got out, and they're going to die anyway. So the first lieutenant of HMS Walker, who is the senior officer overseeing the things at this point, has to take out his pistol and shoot them to put them out of their misery. They can't be saved, and they're just suffering. They managed to proceed under their own power. Vanquisher had to be towed, And at certain points, Vanquisher was actually being towed by Walker, but other times, most of the time, she was being towed by other ships in their group, including Winchelsea. And they took aboard the wounded from Vanquisher. They managed to get to Plymouth by the 14th of September 1939, and she got repairs. She is repaired and back in operations by November 1939. Vanquisher isn't back in service till January 1940. Now, I would like to point out one of the things I worked out when I started doing this ship and started putting this video together was that this is a ship whose entire history of World War II would make for an absolutely amazing Band of Brothers style series, following this ship and what it gets up to in World War II. But I also think quite a lot of it would not be believed. Because you talk about something like that, that is not something which survives a lot in the cultural memory. Things which are very upsetting, almost, to read. You think about those the men who died. They try and sort of obfuscate who dies and where's in that scenario. Now, this is her time in this period. But, well, in 1940, she gets up to more stuff. Because... Ooh, what's happened to the slide? What has happened to the slide? Okay, I have no idea what's happened to the slide, but give me a second. And now the slide's gone completely. So, she gets to take part in a Norway campaign. And she has quite a lot of fun. Walker is the last ship to leave Narvik. She does all sorts of convoy escorting and other operations in 1940, but she is the last British warship to leave Narvik. And she's also been the last to leave a couple of other places in Norway, getting personnel out. She has a very interesting period. She is part of the force which is sent to try and rescue survivors from the El Oro, a tanker which is sunk after hitting a mine from U-30. She is wandering around in various actions. She does convoys all the way down to Gibraltar and operations down there. She's working with the French Navy in this period. She does convoys literally between Gibraltar and Liverpool, and she's doing those constant circuits. And then, well, she gets called to Norway. In the 8th of April 1940, she is transferred to from basically the approaches forces to Home Fleet, based out of Scapa Flow, to provide support for the Norway campaign. She gets attacked by German aircraft on the 9th of April 1940, literally the day after she's transferred to them. She has another air attack on the 30th of April when she's evacuating Allied troops from various places. This is when actually HMS Sheffield comes in, because she is ferrying troops from shore to the cruiser, because the cruiser can better carry them than she can. And she is part of the force which keeps covering for various attacks. And when the Germans are attacking, she's defending against the attacks whilst also ferrying troops out. And she does this in multiple operations up and down the Norwegian coast. As during this period, she also gets, a change to a pennant number. It's worthwhile noting it's May 1940 when she gets changed to I-27. And as said, she is the last Allied, I think, warship to leave Narvik when she leaves there on the 8th of June 1940. And it's not long, it's July 1940, she has the fun of tangling with U-47. And she almost gets her. It comes very close. It comes very close. The U-47 managed to sink the Andorra Star at the time, but the Andorra Star was actually carrying German and Italian prisoners of war to Canada. So that's kind of not really a good kill, but that's what the U-47 hit at the time. And the attack caused enough damage to Walker alone, the battle, that she actually had to go back and get repaired. So from July 1940 to September 1940, she's pretty much in repairs, and then she goes back to the western approaches. And so there you go. This is her 1940. This is her 1940. Okay, she's been part of about 4 daring extractions from Norway. She's tangled with U-47, which of course had famously sunk the Royal Oak in Scapa Flow. She's provided cover for HMS Sheffield. She's provided gunfire support in operations. She's done convoys from Gibraltar to Liverpool. She's come under air attack more than a dozen times. Still not reached the high point of her career. Okay, I want to listen out. She's still not reached the high point of her career. That's 1941. One ship under the command of Commander Donald George Frederick Wyville McIntyre, Royal Navy, acting as the lead ship for the 5th Escort Group, takes out U-99 and U-100, which are led by 2 veteran U-boat aces, in the same day. Like to clarify that. She takes them both out in the same day. One she assists, one she takes alone. Now, do you see what I'm talking about? Otto Ketchner and Joachim Schep. No one remembers... there are books about the German officers that no one remembers George McIntyre. Yes. This is the thing is, when we're talking about the Royal Navy in World War I and its ASW warfare specialist, there is literally one name who comes up, and I won't even say it, I'll just let the chat repeat it. McIntyre is another of those experts. McIntyre is another of those specialists. He is a really skilled, really capable anti-submarine warfare officer. There is a whole lump of them in the Royal Navy. And they're very, very useful. The Royal Navy has been, for some reason, after World War I, has been fostering these sort of people quite well and going, yes, we want them. McIntyre is forgotten. He is one of the very best. He is literally a killer. And if you look him up, you'll go, okay, so this guy, what does he end up in the Royal Navy? What does he get to? You know, what's his final retiring rank? Captain. Then you start looking at the command and who he takes on. He is pretty critical. Oh. So yes, this guy basically goes, right then, you guys have got in my way. And by the way, Ketchner, and I'll talk the story about how they're sunk in a second. I'd just like to point out that McIntyre, in a rather twist of history, McIntyre nicked Ketchner's binoculars and used them for the rest of the war. McIntyre literally, when Ketchner was brought aboard his ship, looked at him and went, "Hello, how are you? Feeling okay? See, you've got some nice binoculars there. I'd like them, please. Thank you." I'm not sure if he said the thank you, but yeah. Grab them. Yeah, he wasn't going to get any use of them anymore. It's all fair. You're not supposed to take things from prisoners of war, but yeah, you know, he's not going to use binoculars. This guy is an absolute this guy is one of those legends who you sit there and look at his career and you go, how the frigate? Okay. Please note, McIntyre is also, he joined the Royal Navy in 1926. He spent a year in a destroyer. Then he joined the Fleet Air Arm to train as a pilot. He served 7 years as a pilot. Then after having an accident in 1935, he decided to specialise in anti-submarine warfare. He gets HMS Kingfisher. He gets, as his first vessel, and then he gets HMS Defender, stationed in the Far East, and does all the jobs out there. He takes part in the Amoy crisis in 1938. If you haven't read up about the Amoy crisis, look it up. It's a really interesting scenario, and the officers involved, and the chief petty officers involved, really deserve a lot more medals than they did. He then is in charge of HMS Venomous when World War II breaks out. In 1939, he's back in the UK, and yeah, he just has fun. Basically, he spends the entirety of World War II going, Germans! Yeah, I think possibly the world was lucky he was no longer a pilot when World War II began, because what can I say? From the definitions of him and his role in the Fleet Air Arm, he could fly anything and was happy to fly anything. And was pushing for flying anything. He would have been an absolute nightmare of anyone if they come across him in the sky. He's that kind of personality. You might have won versus him, but I wouldn't rate your chances too high. But his list of commands... He manages to finish out in charge of a Royal Navy air station. That's his last command, Blackcam. And he gets that because he had been Fleet Air Arm. But he has a really good history. I think he was with Hermes on the China station, I think he was with Courageous in the Home Fleet when the accident happened. I know he did China station. He was out there for Hermes operations in the China station. But I think the accident happened on Courageous, so it's something in 1935 on board Courageous. There is a debate as to which accident it possibly was, but probably should know and probably can find out if you can go if you track down his physical records, but in National Archives, I'm going to have to look them up. He also writes books, by the way. So if you want to read McIntyre's own advice on World War II, he wrote them, and I have his books. I've recommended a few of them to you. His first book, published in 1956, was U-Boat Killer. It's highly recommended. Then there's Destroyer Man, 1957. He did a book on Jutland. He did a book on Narvik, which I've got again down here. I've got U-Boat. I've got Narvik. He did a book called Century of Battleships, Thunder of Guns, published in 1960. Fighting Admiral in 1961. Battleantic in 1961. Admiral Rodney in 1962. I've got his book on naval aviation, Wings of Neptune, 1964. And Sea Power in the Mediterranean, I've got his book from 1972. And I've got Sea Warfare, 1939 to 1945. History of the World Wars, published in the History of World War series, 1977. I've got that as well. U-Boat Killer is a really interesting read. He's also one of the few people I know who, when you go to a lot of the stuff written about him, he's written it himself. When your command style is YOLO, your command style is YOLO. Yes. So, with that being said, and having mentioned this or discussed this all, let's get into, well, the discussion of these how these poor ships came to find themselves in such a bad scenario, facing HMS Walker. And it was a bad scenario for them. It was a very bad scenario for them. You sit there and read the write-up and you go, okay, so yes, the commanding officer of this ship and this task group really had the belief that every submarine in the world belonged to him personally. That's his view. Every submarine belongs to him. They're all his prizes. Now, it's rather appropriate we talk about this because these attacks actually took place in March. So, here's the description for U-99. And this is the simple description you get from U-Boat.net. I'm going to read these out, the descriptions of the battles, and then I'm going to go further into it. So, German U-boat U-99 was scuttled at 03:43 hours on the 17th of March 1941, southeast of Iceland, in position 61 degrees north, 11 degrees 48 west, after being badly damaged by depth charges from the British destroyer HMS Walker. The actual phrasing put forward is that McIntyre managed to arrange it so Walker was launching depth charges faster than any other ship had ever previously launched depth charges. In fact, she was launching them so fast that the ships around her, the other escorts to him, decided that anyone getting close to her was danger close. The deluge was described by the survivors of U-99 as a constant thunder. There were so many depth charges being launched. We do know that Walker probably expended roughly a third of her depth charges, which she was supposed to carry in this attack. We also know that she was carrying a lot more depth charges than she was supposed to. Later on, or rather slightly earlier, because it's 03:18 hours, U-boat U-100 was sunk. She was sunk after being rammed by HMS Vannock in her attempt to get away from depth charges being dropped by HMS Walker. That's actually what they describe. Walker was approaching and dropping depth charges. U-100 tried to get away from the depth charges. She ran across the front of HMS Walker, which went ramming speed. U-100 is lost, I think, with all hands. Now, there is a site called Naval History Net, which also has descriptions of these sort of various things. And its descriptions are slightly more detailed. Now, I'm adding in stuff which are from the books I've read, but I thought I'd give you the site. So you can go to uboat.net, that's those descriptions. And I'm giving you another point to go to, which is navalhistory.net. And the reason I'm giving you those is because the question today is going to be, go find another Ran-and destroyer. Pick a date, do something. Pick a Ran-and destroyer from the Royal Navy and look up its career. I promise you, there is not a single ship you will be disappointed by. All I literally did was pick the 26th of March and look at what I found. And Paul Knight and a few others were going, why are you talking about HMS Walker? What did Walker do? And I went, I had no idea. I literally just picked the ship which was laid down on the 26th of March and followed its career through. And look at what I'm talking about. What this destroyer got up to in World War II. March the 17th, part of escort for convoy HX-112. Took part in the search for U-100 with HMS destroyer Walker. Submarine was forced to surface after sustained hunt. She was then rammed by HMS Walker. During rescue of 6 survivors from U-100, detected U-99 also taking part in attacks on HX-112. Cut off from rescuing survivors to race down U-99. Carried out depth charge attacks on U-99, which surfaced and abandoned by crew. Rescued 40 survivors. Note, U-100 was commanded by Joachim Schrepp and U-99 by Otto Kretschmer, who was the Germany's most successful U-boat commander at that date. By the way, this is the fun postscript and the reason I'm reading this out. Reunions of the survivors of U-99 and the crew of HMS Walker have been held since 1963. By the way, McIntyre was the chief organizer of those reunions. Take care, Peter. So, we are talking about 0318 to 0343 hours. We are talking in the space of half an hour. Not even in a whole day. In the space of half an hour. Commander McIntyre, HMS Walker, take out 2 of Germany's most successful U-boat commanders and their U-boats. That's an intense 30 minutes. I was not... This is not... I sort of guessed the moment I saw McIntyre coming up. I went, hang on. Dates, McIntyre. I know what's coming up when I started reading the histories. But all I'd done was literally pick the date and then find the ship. Reunion being polite language for pub crawl. Broadly speaking, I think they had a well-lubricated time. So, after this salubrious session, this rather enjoyable period in 1941, you have to remember that at the same time as those 2 were lost in that battle, U-47 with Gunther Prien aboard had disappeared 10 days earlier while attacking convoy OB-293. No one's quite sure how she went down. But again, there is a chance that she sank herself. There is a chance that some technical thing happened. There is also a chance that quite a lot of the convoy escort were being very, very, how do I put this politely? Depth charge happy. Very happy, very depth charge happy. So, between the 12th and 15th of January 1942, she carries on with some more of her V&W counterparts, Vannock, Volunteer, and Whiffington, to escort convoys. She's escorting WS-15. Now, that is a troop ship, 22 troop ships, being taken from the Clyde in Scotland to the Suez, Egypt, India, well, Bombay, and Singapore. She's doing that in January 1942. And their part of the escort is literally the first sort of part of it. They take them as far as Gibraltar. Now, whilst they're escorting that convoy, and they're found to be doing quite a good job. So they take them to Gibraltar, then they get back. Then they go to 17th February 1942. They're doing another one, but this convoy, they have extra company. They have Malaya, they have Eagle, they have Formidable, they have Hermione, and a whole slew of what would be considered the 1930s build destroyers. Why? Because that force is going into the Mediterranean. But what's interesting again is that force has to save itself and almost, not get involved. So the V&W ships are providing the outer circuit. They are preventing anything from getting close. Submarines want to come near, they're not going to get near. But they want to come near. No, McIntyre's there with Walker. They're not getting anywhere near this ship. Nope. Not happening. Just not happening. This is a convoy group which is known to depth charge first, depth charge second, depth charge third, and only ask questions if something surfaces to question. And that's not unusual. Okay? One of the things that's often forgotten about World War II is we talk a lot about the number of kills the U-boat force achieved. What's often left to one side is the number of losses the U-boats suffer. And whilst, yes, aircraft are always a threat, especially when they're on the surface and they get caught on the surface, and yes, there are lots of other things which are a threat to them, but the escorts, they be crazy. And the U-boats have to remember this. There are quite literally some escort commanders, and I'm not sure if Walker fits in this category, who literally are fitting their ship with extra launchers, are fitting their ships with extra rails, are improvising other methods of launching depth charges so they can maximize the number they can launch in their spread. One of the things the British see that the French have is the French have depth charge chutes that they can launch them through. And the British look at that guy and go, could we do this? Actually, they tend to not to because the chutes have other issues. But that doesn't stop the British having plans. There is one ship which, if I remember correctly, I think it was wheelbarrows or something. They managed to improvise. They managed to, when they were at one point in was it Scotland? They found some wheelbarrows that they used as extra depth charge launchers. They angled them on the deck and they would roll the depth charge in and it would flick out, was the idea they had. But most of the depth charge happy tendencies led to most of those commanders managing to find spaces for carrying more depth charges than they were supposed to. You're supposed to only carry 40 depth charges. Yes, sir. I carry 40 in the magazine. And 40 on deck. But she's a successful ship. She is. And unsurprisingly, well, I should cover this in 1943. She spends most of 1943 in a dockyard having a conversion. She is one of the V&W vessels converted into a long-range escort. Finally, she gets a conversion. And this conversion, they replace the torpedo tubes with some 12-pounder AA guns. They put in some 20mm Oricons. They get a Type 271 radar. They get a Type 291 radar. They get HFDF, or HFDF, high frequency direction finding, and they lose. And they lose one of their boiler rooms. And they get extra fuel tanks, so the speed drops to 24.5 knots. But yeah, she's one of the vessels converted. She's kind of late, February to April 1943, but she's finally being converted. It's useful. She's going to find it useful. She then comes out and goes to join the 4th Escort Group. Now, the point is here, she is under the command of McIntyre for quite a while. Till March 1943. So she's actually goes through that conversion, still being under command of McIntyre. She then gets a guy called James Marjoribanks Rowland. Now, this is a man who how do I put this politely? Is known for his firm opinions, very firm opinions on what the action of warships should be in anti-submarine warfare. James Marjoribanks Rowland. He is one of the people who was very upset with the fact that Canadian vessels at certain points in World War II weren't being fitted with the latest and greatest equipment, because it just wasn't available in numbers, and the Canadians had the policy of, we're taking whatever we've got to go out there. And Rowland felt that they should all be armed with everything they needed to be armed. He's an interesting soul. He is a very interesting soul. And when he takes command of her in March 1943, he's immediately going, okay, so what are our options? Where are we off to kill? Because this ship has good pedigree. This ship has good pedigree, and I want to be part of its pedigree. I want to be part of its history. And he will get to be part of its history. He really will. Now, as part of July 1943, convoy OG-91, KMS 22, HMS Walker took the job of escorting the rescue ship, which is at the back of the convoy. Now, this was often considered to be the most dangerous position, because the rescue ship sailing behind the convoy was often charged with A, picking up survivors from a ship which had been damaged or sunk. So it was actively going towards the areas which were going to be in danger, and B, was often trailing behind, so was a target. Walker was her escort. Walker does a very good job of being her escort. And when they decide they're going to detach 2 vessels to leave the convoy to go to Gibraltar, and they are limited to 12.5 knots, it's Walker which gets the job of escorting them alone. Both ships arrive in Gibraltar intact. Despite efforts by others to the contrary, they get there. Walker continues with similar style operations for the entirety of the convoy era period in 1943, and she basically gets a reputation of being the officer of the ship which is, how do I put this politely, going to make sure its ships get to where they're going. Now, unfortunately, Roland's not in command for too long. He's not. And it's handed over to a guy called Arthur Nichol Roll. And Roll, well, Lieutenant Commander Arthur Nichol Roll is another of those incredibly interesting characters in the Royal Navy. He is an officer who would retire a commander in March 1959. He lists the commands he has while the lieutenant commander. They are Duncan, Griffin, Beagle, and Walker. He is one of those officers who, realistically, we'd like to know more about, because he sank the Guglielmo Marconi while he was in charge of HMS Duncan. He also managed to, at several points, tangle with U-204 and U-206, and whilst he didn't sink them, he managed to make them go away. Again, another interesting officer. But really, he is interesting to us because he is the officer in charge of Walker when Walker is doing the Arctic convoys and the Normandy run. So, when other ships are thinking, you know what, the end of the war's coming, I'm going to have a peaceful time. The Atlantic's getting better, I'm going to peace out a bit. No, Walker's going, Arctic convoys! This ship has basically no ability of chill. There is no chill in this ship when it comes to warfighting. Absolutely none, at all. No chill. It's constant with this ship. And again, I literally picked it for the date, and I wanted tonight's video to not be a very long video because I've got having to get up very early tomorrow morning, and you know, all that. But no, this ship, it just keeps on going. It just keeps on, and I've gotten more, and I've got more, and that's part of the fun of history. But it is a classic example of this scenario of, literally, I picked the ship for the date. I was thinking, I'm going to give you a classic example of a Royal Navy destroyer. And I did get a classic example of a Royal Navy destroyer. Basically, the ship itself is mildly obsessed about taking out the enemy, let alone the crew that get given attached to it. The thing, actually, no, my coach, here's the really interesting thing. Imagine if Walker had been with Warspite during the during the Third Battle of Narvik. There were submarines aiming for Warspite and failing to sink her. Walker would have been going, this is my idea of a shooting gallery. Literally, it's a shame Walker wasn't there. That would have been an interesting... Captain McIntyre, HMS Walker, and the Battle of Narvik, that would have been... We'd be talking about the losses to the German submarine force equaling the losses to the destroyer force in that battle. Ay, caramba. By the way, she also has time hanging around with various tribal-class destroyers. Walker under McIntyre's... while she's under command of McIntyre and his group, is often called in to back up the tribal class as extra destroyers for escorting battleships and capital ships. You know, the German destroyers charging Warspite have to get past the tribals first. That doesn't ever happen. The submarines would be dealing with Walker. It's just... I'm actually... This is the thing is, I'm condensing down what she does, and I'm not talking about all her history because it's just so much. I'm giving you the key points, but even going through my own notes, which I made, I do admit I got a little bit note happy. So the notes in that for 1944 are kind of quite a lot. And by the way, please note, Walker also finds time that almost every time there seems to be an ASW exercise going where they're testing new techniques and new methodologies of how to hunt submarines and kill them, she seems to turn up. She seems to turn up. It's obsessive. So if we start off with March 1944, escorting an Arctic convoy. Well, in this operation, during March, on the 29th of March 1944, when, of course, New 961 is sunk by HMS Starling, the Black Swan class sloop, guess who's hanging with her? HMS Walker. Going, "Oh, goody, you're here. Have a go. You don't get it, it's mine." That pretty much sums up the entire convoy from a submarine perspective. You have Black Swan class sloops sitting there going, "Hello, yes, we're taking them out. Walker, why are you this close? You're supposed to be the inner escort group." "I'm just here in case you miss. If you fall short, don't worry, they won't survive." I'm always surprised some of the Black Swans didn't get performance anxiety. There's someone literally watching that close going, please fail, then it's mine, it's mine, it's mine. Black Swans are going, we're built for this. We are specialists in anti-submarine warfare. We are the elite of ASW warfare. Walker going, "I did 2 aces in a day. I want a 3rd. I want to get 3 aces. Actually, can you become an ace of aces? I want to get 5. Commander, can you calm your ship down? No, I'm barely in control of it as you speak. Ronan, I'm now comparing HMS Walker to a heavily armed R2-D2. That's the point. This is quite... Again, I picked a random destroyer. Oh, the entire point of this video was to just give you a destroyer's review and talking convoys and what they get up to in peace, in wartime, and then it's the case of, no, you picked Walker, which is the most extreme of the regular destroyers, in that she does everything the regular destroyers do, but to an extreme level. And she does all the convoys. As said, she does get involved in D-Day as well in this period, and yeah, oh good lord. Now, it should also be noted that for D-Day, she was assigned technically to Escort Group 137. This was a group which was built around her, HMS Honeysuckle, which was, I think, a Flower-class corvette, yeah, and a couple of trawlers. A Lincolnshire and, I think it was a French name, Lanatis? Yeah, Lanatis. It's on my notes there, I should just read my notes. And they were escorting the convoy from Milford Haven to the beaches. That was convoy E2B27, which was troop transports, 32 of them carrying the US Army. And they were to get to the invasion beaches on the 8th of June. And that's what she did. They got there. They had 2 potential scares where there were potentially submarines. And the exact response of the note seems to be that Walker, not sure if there was a submarine or not, made sure there was sufficient enough explosive in the water that anyone who was underwater was deaf. That was her policy. And she basically carrying on our convoys right to the end of June. She's just doing convoys from wherever the troop transports are to Normandy for the rest of June. And and through it, she expends quite a large amount of... Let's put it this way. I don't have exact figures for how many depth charges she expended in that period. All I know is that the note I've got is she expended a rather large quantity. Not sure if she sank any submarines. But after this, she returns to Arctic escort work. And she carries that on until February 1945, which she then takes on the role of ASW operations and coastal convoy escort around the British Isles, sort of in close areas, and making sure they're safe. And basically, that's what she's doing until the German surrender. Afterwards, they did survey and decide if she could redeploy to the Far East. They decided that she wasn't in proper condition for that, and so she was placed in reserve. She's not sold for scrap, though, till March 1946. You know, the normal things. Now, we are going to open up questions again, but there you go. Just me picking a random British destroyer, and I get something which could have been a Hollywood movie or TV series. I'm sorry, I didn't intend it to be that. It wasn't the intention. Oh, these things happen, these that don't go. I'm just picking a random destroyer. Sadu, could you build some ships just to have in reserve if you can't crew them? Yeah. And that's the way navies have often done that in the past. Haven't they? They have. You build, if you consider what occasionally the Royal Navy did was they built a class of 12 ships, and the first 4 would go straight into reserve. Would go into reserve after the last 12 ones ended service. This video is I'm glad you enjoyed this video, Knights, everyone. I'm glad. I knew there was going to be quite a lot of people going to look at it and go, "What the frigate are you talking about this ship for?" Well, because she's nuts and deserves it, and I'm looking forward to the long patrol, which I've got planned out already, and I've got stuff for. So that's going to be even more. I'm hopefully going to have more of McIntyre's books here for that. Hello. Yes, I know you're gorgeous. I know it's your bedtime, but you consider any time from 9 o'clock to be your bedtime. And realistically, no, we're answering questions. We're answering questions. Yes, we are. We're answering questions. I know I've got things to pack because I'm off early tomorrow morning, but, you know, you'll be fine. You'll be able to look after the girls. You'll have your brother here as backup. Don't look at me like that. You'll be perfectly fine. But yeah, you can build stuff to just stick them in reserve. In fact, again, it's quite a sensible thing to do. It allows you to extend the ship's lives, and then you can always pull out a reserve what you need. If you've got a ship which suddenly needs to go into refit, or you suddenly need to surge stuff, you can pull out them from the reserve. It's quite a sensible thing, actually, putting some, let's say, the first 4 ships in the reserve service. A, it gives you time to fix them, because, let's be honest, if you're building a class of 12, the first 4 are probably ones you were testing things out before you got into your rhythm. And so you can upgrade them all to the proper to what you're happy with. And B, then when any of your other ships need to go into long-term refit, major refit, you pull out one of the reserve ships to cover it so you don't lose it from your force structure. And that affects, you know, how you're able to maintain things and how you're able to support them. Stafford Dobson, are there enough mariners on the UK rosters to be supplemental RN members if the Treasury open the coffers for reserves? There are some, but also you'd have to sort of think of other things as well. If you consider diesel engines these days, and there's quite a lot of heavy machine operators who run similar, who you know, have some similar skills and licenses as those. There are also, if you consider the computer systems aboard ships, etc., which are used to directing sensors and weapon systems, again, a lot of that is kind of skills which can be learnt. One of the things I find interesting is we're spending all this money developing simulators and building simulators for training for serving personnel. And yet you go, right, and once you developed all this stuff, you could build multiple simulators and you could use them to train reservists personnel to operate these systems. That's what I never understand that one. The amount of money we spend in developing and building these things, and then we build a one-off, and you sort of go, well, in a nice way, for not much extra money, you could build multiple. And A, that would give you more resiliency if you wanted to do upgrades and updates on one. You wouldn't lose the availability. And B, you could then have reservists and people training these things. Sunny Free North, Captain Don McIntyre commanded Walker. Yes, he did command for a while in World War II, as I've talked about. He wasn't the only one, but yes, he is. He is certainly one of the more interesting commanders to have in charge of you. Leslie Mitchell, was the Graf Spee at the review? I think she was at the earlier review. I don't think she was at the 1939 review. I think she was at the 1935 review. I think she was there. I think it was the 35 review that one of them went along to. Nice. So what have the VW class seen as more expendable in World War II? If you had to choose, if you didn't have a choice and you had to lose either one of them or one of the more modern destroyers, you'd probably pick one of them. But it's a case of, I don't want to lose anything if I can avoid it. This is the point I sometimes try and make, is things are never really expendable, but sometimes they're the least worst option. Nice one. How accurate is it that the World War I VW class destroyers would have served if World War II had been delayed to 1942 as the Iron Fort? They probably would have been held in reserve till definitely at least 1942. The odds are the British were the Royal Navy were planning on holding some of them in reserve till 1944, depending on their condition. Basically, they would have held them in reserve as long as they can to keep the numbers up. The Graf Spee was at the 1937 Coronation Review. Oh, 1937 one as well. Oh, she was. I thought it was the 1935 one, but no, it might well be 1937. Honestly, I should probably pay more attention to the reviews and their contents. I really should. I've got a book about all of them, and I have read it a while back, but I probably should read it again. Because one of the things I see what the reviews are there for in terms of showing strength, etc. But it's one of my areas of occasional lapses where I go, I'm sure, I think it's a 1955, but it's a 37, and it's a sort of confusion. I'm better with... It's a weird, annoying thing. I've got to fix it. I'll have to spend more time reading that book. Commit it to memory. Showcase models of Australia did a 1350 BMW class plastic injection kit. It converted HMS Vendetta to HMS Walker, gave it a mine-laying sponsons and extended ship's bridge. Yes, the mine-laying sponsons were used for other things with the depth charges, but we'll leave that to one side. They had fun. Glow, what is the original the optimal size of a ship for a nation to start with when creating a homegrown shipbuilding industry? Are you 5,000 ton reaching too high, or is it a good place to start? Modern versus interwar. In interwar period, you want to probably start with something about 2,500 tons, something which is big enough to require skill building, but small enough that if you muck up, you're not spending too much money. These days, you're probably looking about 5,000 tons for the same level of equivalent capability because of the needs of missiles and computers and sensors and the space they take up. Hello! Yes, you're very keen on something. Is it by any chance the biscuits? People think you're asking for things. They keep going, and I know, because I know the biscuits are there, and I can draw a direct line back to your eyes. Direct line. You got an ad for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police? So do. Lucky you. Was it a horsey ad? Nice ignorant. So the collision between Walker and Vanquisher that left 40 men. Do we know why they collided? They were operating close together. It was not necessarily good weather, and it was at night. That's basically the information you get. But from the damage sustained, I'm not sure which. I think it's probably Vanquisher which found itself on Walker rather than Walker on Vanquisher. I'd say from looking at images, but it's a tough one to go for because it was dark and... Again, in the nicest way, there are parts of me which have nerves. And you might be cute, but that's not cute. Aiden Cloak, if you were making a basis to patrol the Northwest Passage, where are you placing them? I would have to do a lot of study to answer that one, because I'd have to look at infrastructure. Because whilst there's the geography, there's also the infrastructure and what you can most easily build and where you can get the stuff to. There is no point having a base which you can't supply. So it's where can I build a railway line to? Where can I build a decent road network from? Where can I sustain as much as where is optimally sensible? And there are spaces like that, but I don't want to have supply. I have to be dependent upon the sea for getting supplies in. Ian Clarke, favourite destroyer design, destroyer shipbuilder company? Thornycroft, or is it someone else? It's got to be between Thornycroft and White, but both of them are intriguing. Let's take it front. If Walker was a ship girl in the world of Azure Lane, as an Admiralty W class destroyer and long-range escort destroyer, if paired with a captain, commander, how terrifying would she be? Let's put it this way. She would not. She would be sort of one of those things which theoretically is very weak, but is absolutely crazy. So you basically take her out as first round because you have no idea what she'll do when she gets her chance. You have no way of predicting her. Other than that she will fire everything. See, Clarke, on the subject of simulators, is this how some of the submarine training now happens to due to the like a submarine test school? There is a lot of simulators used for training across the forces. A lot of simulators. There has to be. No. So, how difficult would it be to reduce a W class today, or has that entire thought process now? Look, if you wanted to build a W class, you could get the plans and you could work out how to build it, but it wouldn't really be useful for warfighting today. An equivalent to the W class, well, we're building a few equivalents to them. I would argue, when you're looking at their capabilities and their profiles, they are closer to probably a light frigate style thing, like the FDI, the Frigate Intervention, or the Type 31, than they are something like the Type 26 or, Type 45 or something larger. But, they're capable assets. What would the destroyer-sized Black Swans look like? They're about the same size. Black Swans are a little over 1,000 tons. The V&W class destroyers are a little over 1,000 tons. There isn't really much difference between the Black Swans and the destroyers in size. And let's be honest, when you're talking about their hull, the Hunt class actually used the same hull as the Black Swans, because it's a hull from the Egret class of sloops. Or isn't he? Yeah, he's finally having his food. That's good. Instead of demonic biscuits, he's eating his own food. His dinner's literally sitting there empty. Loudwood, how effective were early homing torpedoes used in the Second World War? Ooh. They had an impact. They were effective, but it took them a while to mature. And they were also more easily spoofed than movies about them would have you believe. In fact, there's a report that one potentially spent its entire time chasing itself. Which they shouldn't have done, but apparently did. Should we be lucky HMS Walker never got... No! Walker would be lovely to have a successor. It would just be an interesting discussion as to what exactly that successor was up to, and where she was aiming for. Right then. I know I do normally go on longer, but as said, I have to be on an incredibly early train tomorrow, and then I'm in charge of teenagers for a few days, and they're going to be lovely. It's going to be fun, but it also is... It's different from my normal. It's a residential centre. It's going to be fun. So I'm going to finish off answering questions, then I'll close the bot, then turn things off. But I will tell you this. Next Tuesday is the Horizon Frigate Project and the Type 45 Daring class. That's the video coming out on the Tuesday evening. And then it's going to be the Italians and defending their cradle. And I might well record, actually, at the same time while I'm away, the waging a war of two seas, the Russian Navy in World War One. They both could be interesting. But anyway, let's get. It's going to be a fun few days, and I have scheduled the lives for when I'm here, and I have scheduled the premieres to cover the thing. So there are going to be this. There's going to be a premiere on Sunday because, whilst I should theoretically have good Wi-Fi and be in a school and able to chat with you all, there is also the reality that I am responsible for a couple hundred teenagers. So yeah, I don't want to. I will be watching the chat and chatting away in the chat from my phone, but I will probably also be keeping an eye on what's going on. Should take you with me, shouldn't I? You'll probably keep them organised. No, that'd be your brother. You would want them all to pat you and pay pat tax. Your brother would herd them. We know the differences. You keep them organised because they be patting you. He keep them organised because they be organised. Let's answer these questions. Sam Thompson, would you guess the Walker had 120 depth charges on if they stored another 40 on the crew spaces? I don't know if they stored any in the crew spaces, but I know they stored a lot. I know Walker was known for overcarrying a lot of them. And there are jokes about numbers, but there's no firm number anywhere. And it's one of those things, again, there are jokes about how many depth charges some of these ships were packing. This is, again, one of the discussions you get into, because you start looking at the records and you go, well, how are they getting more than they necessarily need? And the thing is, the depth charges, especially at certain points in the war, are literally just being stored quite near depth and just being delivered, and are just being run in as quick as they could be. And there's also quite a large stockpile of depth charges which are left over and have been maintained. So, yes. We can tell you how many the depth charges they were officially supposed to take. We can also tell you she overloaded. We can't really tell you how many she did take. And believe it or not, some ships actually in the World War II area were destroyers were fitted with aircraft. The Americans tried it with a couple of Fletchers, I think, and the Swedes tried it as well. And various other people tried it with putting aircraft on destroyer-sized vessels. You could do it. It wasn't necessarily a good idea. Basically, realistically, you needed the space of a cruiser. Realistically, because it takes up a lot of space and requires a lot of extra personnel and all sorts of things to look after it. With that being said, though, Craig, you put an I, not a question mark, in front of your question. I was going, hang on, where's Craig's question come? And I'm just going to add it in, don't worry. So, could Britain set up a manufacturing facility to build Mark 41 VLS to increase production for the future capacity? Yes. Yes, we could. Mark 41 is actually built by BAE. If I'm not mistaken, there's actually some of the components of it are built actually already in the UK by BAE. But I'm not 100% sure of that, but it would certainly fit with some of the discussions made of it. But you're never quite sure where all the stuff is made by BAE, because they like to spread it out. And I like to go, yes, we assembled this all in America because it's for America. But, yeah, hello. Oh, right then. Oh, we have climbed right up the ladder. That's what we're doing. Okay. Right. Hello. You're making sure you get lap time before Papa goes, aren't you? You are, I don't know, poodles. Poodles. Right then. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope you enjoyed tonight's video. Hope you found it more fun than expected. Hope you found it more interesting than expected. Just a random British destroyer. And, yeah. Take care. What are you now licking? Why are you going so mad on my... Poodles, they're nuts. Oh, God, off you. Right, you've been knocking books over, all sorts of things. You are such a happy destruction bot sometimes. Take care, everyone. Thank you for being here. Hope you enjoyed tonight's video, and yeah, see you soon. See you for a live next Sunday. Not this Sunday, but next Sunday. And for a Thursday video again in probably, let's see, 1, 2, about 3 weeks' time. Take care, everyone. Please do like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you, Devs fan. Thank you much, everyone, and take care. You basically want me to get a giant biscuit out, don't you? Okay. Maybe once the camera's off. As a going away treat. Don't worry, they've got treats arriving for when I'm away. I have scheduled stuff. It will come while I'm away. You're not getting them all right now. Take care, everyone. Thank you, and hope you enjoyed.